Hi guys, in this section of the course we're going to be covering some of the networking components of AWS. And so it all really falls into the overarching virtual private cloud. There's lots of components of a virtual private cloud, and that's what we're going to be discussing throughout this section. So first off, what is a virtual private cloud? Well, a VPC is a logically isolated portion of the AWS cloud within a region. So that means that you can create a VPC and it's an isolated area that you can create your resources in. So it's private and secured and controlled by you. And you can create multiple VPCs within a region. So as you know, within a region we have availability zones, at least two, often more. Within a VPC, what we do is we create subnets, and the subnets sit inside an availability zone. So each subnet is within one availability zone. Now, what is a subnet? Well, a VPC has an address block, a block of addresses that can be assigned to all the instances you deploy. And a subnet just has a block within the larger block. So it's a kind of smaller block of addresses within the overall block of addresses that are assigned to that network. So you can launch EC2 instances into your subnets within your VPC. And those subnets can be what we call public subnets or private subnets. And a public subnet just means that the EC2 instances in this subnet will get a public IP address. So the address that they get is one that you can find on the internet rather than a private address, which is what you have for EC2 instances in private subnets. So how does connectivity work? Well, there's something called a VPC router. You don't actually see it, but it's there. And the way that you interact with it or control it is through what we call a route table. Now, you don't need to understand route tables or the addresses that you need to put into them. It's just a good thing to understand so that you can work out how a virtual private cloud functions. So in a route table, we have a set of addresses that get routed locally, and that means that if this EC2 instance wants to talk to this one, they'll both have an address in this range, and so the connectivity can take place internally through the router. But to go to the outside world, the internet, and this address here means any other address, so anything that isn't within this address range here, send it to the internet gateway. So an internet gateway is attached to a VPC, but it kind of sits at the edge of your region because it is the gateway to the internet itself. So all traffic going in and out from the internet to your VPC and out again has to go via the internet gateway. So you can have multiple VPCs. And what we can see here is each VPC has what we call a CIDR block. And this stands for classless inter-domain routing. You don't need to understand CIDR in a lot of detail for the Cloud Practitioner exam. You just need to know that each VPC has its own block of addresses. And then each subnet within a VPC has a block that's within this block, so it's a subset of this block of addresses. And you can have multiple subnets within an availability zone, and they can be any mixture of public and private. But remember that a subnet cannot go across availability zones, so it's always within an individual availability zone. So let's have a look at some of the components of a VPC. So we've just learned what a VPC itself is. It's a logically isolated virtual network in the AWS cloud. So just remember, this is a virtual data center essentially. So think of it as your virtual data center on the AWS cloud. You then have the subnets, which are a segment of the VPC's address range. We then have what's called an internet gateway and also an egress-only internet gateway. So these are the gateways in and out of the internet. The first one, the internet gateway, is for IP version 4, and the second one, the egress-only internet gateway, is for IP version 6. So those are two different IP addressing strategies. You then have that router. So that's the one that routes data between all of your EC2 instances within your VPC. A peering connection is a direct connection between two VPCs. So you can create a direct connection between these two VPCs, which means that they can send data directly between each other. So if you had an EC2 instance here and one here, you can send data between the two directly. We also have something called a VPC endpoint, And this is a way that you can connect services that are public AWS services straight into your VPC. So normally, if you were connecting from an EC2 instance to Amazon S3, it would be sort of out here in the region somewhere, which means you actually have to go out to the internet gateway to reach it because it's got a public IP address. Even if you've got a public subnet with an EC2 instance with a public IP address, it still has to go out the internet gateway and actually reach Amazon S3. If you have a VPC endpoint, Amazon S3 would be able to talk directly into your VPC. We then have two things called a NAT instance and a NAT gateway. And we're going to have a whole lesson on these with some diagrams to show you exactly what they are. You just need to understand at this stage, it's a way for your private instances to get out to the internet. So in this example, the EC2 instance in the public subnet can go straight to the router and out to the internet because it has a public IP address. The private instance can't, so you need a way for it to connect to something else that has a public IP address so that it can talk outbound. If that's a little bit confusing, don't worry, it will all be cleared up later in this section. A virtual private gateway and a customer gateway, these are both parts of virtual private networks. So a way to connect into Amazon over the public internet and create a private or at least a virtual private network, so something that's encrypted and secure. And again, we're going to go over those in detail later in the section, along with AWS Direct Connect. So this is another way of connecting from, in this case, a corporate data center or a corporate network into the AWS cloud. And you create a private connection that doesn't go over the internet. We then have security groups and network ACLs. And these are both firewalls. One's an instance level firewall and one's a subnet level firewall. And again, we're going to have a lesson on this, so you'll understand that by the end of this section. So it can be quite a big topic, VPC. You don't need to know everything for the Cloud Practitioner, but let's go over some of the key facts you do need to know. So you need to know that a virtual private cloud is a virtual network dedicated to your AWS account. It's similar to having a DC inside AWS, so your own data center inside AWS. It's logically isolated from other virtual networks in the AWS cloud. You have complete control over the virtual networking environment, and that means you can select your own IP address ranges, create your own subnets, and configure your own route tables and gateways. You can launch resources such as EC2 instances into your VPC. When you create it, you have to specify the IP version 4 address range. So that's what we call a classless inter-domain routing block, CIDR block. A VPC spans all availability zones in the region, but you create VPCs in each region. So you'll see when we go into the console in the hands-on labs that there are actually VPCs created by default for you in every single region. You have full control over who has access to the resources inside your VPC. So you have total control over how you restrict or allow access. By default, you can create up to 5 VPCs per region. And a default VPC is created in every region with a subnet in each availability zone within that region. So that's it for an overview of VPC. What we're going to do now is go into a hands-on lab where I'm going to show you around the console and show you where each of these configuration items are in the VPC management console.